Welcome to a new episode of the Guru Perspective. And today I will be talking about what happened in college football, the championship week. And I will also be focusing on what happened in the NFL in week 14. And I will be talking about the Army Navy game prediction. And on top of that, I will be discussing what went on or what's going to happen in week 15 and the teams that I'm going to pick to select who's going to win those games as well. I want to start off by talking about it was a really good college football weekend. I was really surprised. I was happy to see some of the things that happened. And I'm just really surprised that they stuck to their guns and they looked at it like, well, some of the teams who have been getting the leeway didn't get the leeway this time. You know, they stuck with their guns. They looked on the strength of schedule and win and loss records, and they went off of that. They didn't go on big name schools about who you were, the history that you have, or anything. They basically stuck with the now, and it was totally appreciated. Me being the person from Michigan, it didn't really matter as much to me, but I know my family in Alabama was feeling it when they found out that they definitely wasn't in the championship. But losing the three games that they lost, one of them was to Vanderbilt. At the time, they were ranked, but they lost six games. And then you turn around and you lose again to a team like Oklahoma, not disrespecting Oklahoma, but saying that they were 5-5 until they took Alabama and they blew Alabama out. Alabama only kicked and made a field goal in that game. So that really spoke volumes. I thought that game was going to keep them out, and it did. No disrespect. I feel like SMU and some of the other teams who were ranked had stronger and they played better competition. I mean, still, Alabama's 3-1 against top 10 teams, but the teams you lost against was really the icing on the cake for you guys. And I mean, what else can I say? I have to respect that. And with the 12 teams, I feel like they rightfully deserve where they're going to be at right now. Number 12 was Clemson. And Clemson's going to be taking on Texas. And the winner of that game take Arizona State. Right now, I believe it will be Texas. I wouldn't be surprised if Clemson win, but I still feel like Texas has a better strength. And I just believe they're a better team altogether. But don't steep on Dabo Sweeney because it could go any way. I'm looking at Tennessee and Ohio State. I'm going to go with Ohio State on this one, and I believe Ohio State will be facing Oregon. SMU and Penn State. I'm gonna go with Penn State on this one, and the winner, of course, take number 3 Boise, and then Indiana, Notre Dame. I'm thinking that it's going to be Notre Dame who face off against Georgia. So here we are. I feel like right now Texas will be taking Arizona. Ohio State will be taking Oregon. Penn State will be taking Boise State. And Notre Dame will be taking Georgia. Then in those games, I feel like Texas is definitely going to beat Arizona State. I'm going to go with Oregon over Ohio State. Boise State over SMU, and Georgia, of course, over Notre Dame. So then in this bracket, I will basically talk about that one a little bit more when it reach. But those are the teams I feel like that'll be in that championship round. Like I said, I definitely feel like it will be Texas versus Arizona State, Ohio State versus Oregon, Penn State of Boise State. I mean, Penn State against Boise State, and Notre Dame against Georgia. I want to focus more on what happened too in the games just recently because I feel like that's definitely important. It was a really good weekend, like I explained. I thought that Iowa State would play much better than what they did, but Arizona State stumped them and they beat them convincingly. And that win basically spoke volumes of how good that team is. The final score was Iowa State 19 and Arizona State 45. The main attraction was Skettable. I really was surprised at how well he played. Cam Skettable had a lot to prove in that game. He had 170 carries and he had 2 touchdowns. I feel like the quarterback, Sam Levitt, he played pretty good as well. 219 yards and 3 scores. On the other end, I felt like it was a stagnant performance. I thought more of Rocco Beck. I thought that he was going to play better, and they definitely disappointed. He had 214 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. And the receiver who played good was Jaden Higgins. That guy looked really sharp on the day. I definitely wouldn't be surprised if he's a first, second round draft pick if he's coming out. And I just felt like the game at the end was so out of hand that they kind of gave those points away. It was more like garbage points at the time. I feel like Arizona State is going to be a force to be reckoned with as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they're going to do in the playoffs. I want to move on and I want to talk about the Georgia and Texas game. Number 5 Georgia versus number 2 Texas. You heard me say this last week. I said there's no way that Texas is going to lose twice to Georgia. I was wrong. It was a really close game. I basically put a lot on Quinn Ewers, and I felt like he was the reason why they lost the game. But at the same time, I feel like, yeah, I feel like Archie Banning should have played in some cases, especially when Quinn Ewers wasn't playing as well. Gunnar Stockton, he was usable in that game. I feel like Carson Beck wasn't really playing that well, and then he got injured, and that forced him to come in the game. But Gunnar Stockton played actually pretty well as far as a young man who, at the last minute, had to come in the game and do what he could to help out his team. He didn't really do as much as far as it didn't look flashy, but on the ground, he really stepped up for those guys. He was 12 for 16 for 71 yards, and he had a pick. Travis Etienne really looked good. I mean, Trevor Etienne. I keep getting those two mixed up, but one's in the NFL and one's still in college. But Trevor Etienne had 94 rushing yards and he had 2 scores, and it was very hard to maintain him. Quentin Ewers had 358 yards. He had a touchdown and he had 2 crucial picks. I felt like that second pick cost him, but then Stockton threw a pick, but it was still at the end of the day a really good game. And I was happy to see how things escalated at the end because it all came down to overtime. And in the overtime, I felt like when Texas kicked the field goal, I said, oh, they gave them a chance. And I said they can drive down the field, and they have been driving down the field on Texas. And I felt like if they get this score, it's over with. And then when they got the touchdown on the rush, I really felt like that rushing touchdown was the walk off, but it was still a really good contested game. I'd be hard on Quinn Ewers a lot, but then I still feel like he played okay. I feel like he made some really crucial mistakes, but in a game like that, he still had them in the game. It could have went either way. So keep your head up, Quinn Ewers. I know I definitely be hard on you, but when it comes down to it, some plays you could clean up here and there. But I believe he'll be good in the pros if he sit behind a veteran player and learn from that aspect of the game. Because I don't feel like a lot of these guys are going to be really good just coming in and being starters right now. That's just the truth about it. This is going to be probably one of the weakest quarterback drafts, but I might be wrong. I really doubt this. The strength of the quarterbacks in this one's probably the worst. You might have a good 2 top tier quarterbacks, maybe 3, and after that, the bottom's going to fall off. So I think it's going to be good as far as the O line and defensive players, more or less, and some receivers too. They got some really good receivers in this draft. The final score was 22-19, and Georgia moved on. They both going in the playoffs, so it really doesn't really matter. That's what a lot of people were saying too. Once it comes to those teams, whoever win depends on their records. They'll still be in the playoffs. Like when Penn State and Oregon, even though Oregon won 37-45, both teams are still in. It was still a really heck of a game. I thought Drew Allen would have played better, but the 3 touchdowns was good. The 2 picks definitely hurt him. Dylan Gabriel played lights out, and I have to definitely put more respect on Dylan Gabriel's name because not only did he execute, but he played at the highest when they needed him the most. 283 yards and four scores on the day with no interceptions. He was really clean on the interception tip. And Jordan James, man, have a game, why don't you? He had 87 yards and carries and two touchdowns. Wide receiver Tez Johnson looked pretty good too. He was impressive in the game. He had 181 yards off 11 receptions, man. He was catching everything. His hands was like glue, and he had a touchdown on the day. The running back, Katron Allen really looked good in the game too. He really stepped his game up with 124 yards and a touchdown. It was really some good game play here. Like I said, Drew Aller, man, if he would have cleaned up those interceptions, I think that they would have still been in it. But either way, they only really lost by like 8 points. And I thought that they were going to get blew out at first by Oregon, but Drew Aller and Penn State showed me something different. And what they showed me was, regardless of what I think and how they lose on the big stage and how they don't beat the big teams when they should, I still feel like they belong in the playoffs. Clemson SMU was a really good game at first. I was talking to a couple of my buddies and some, people who was watching the games, and I said to one of my homeboys, E-Buck, I said it was an issue in the game because if SMU get beat this bad by Clemson, they shouldn't be there in the first place, and they made a hell of a game out of it in the second half. It was a tell of two tapes. Clemson, they shut them down, and the only thing Clemson really was able to do was do the walk off at the end because SMU came all the way back. They gave up too many big plays at the end, and that field goal was costly. I know they were brokenhearted, but still they're in. So congratulations on being in the playoffs. But that was a heck of a game, especially a comeback there too as well at the end. Cade Klubnik really showed me something that game too. He looked spectacular, 262 yards, and he had four touchdowns, no picks on the day. On the other hand, Kevin Jennings surprised me. I thought he was more of a running quarterback, but when he was in a pocket, he executed well. He had 304 yards, three touchdowns, and he had a pick on the day. Man, Brian Wesco, he really looks sharp. That wide receiver really stepped his game up in a game that mattered. He had eight receptions, 143 yards, and he had two touchdowns as well. That 34-31 victory for Clemson just still lets me know, regardless of the fact if they're not doing NIL or if they don't have a lot of guys that they got through the transfer portal and they're just sticking to their guns, they still had a solid enough team to play and to make it into the playoffs. I just hope they use NIL and they're recruiting a little better now because at this point where you got to get guys off the NIL and you got to do things in the transfer portal to better your team. It's more or less getting into the NFL style of play. And they're not going to have to, or they can't stick to the old school ways. You continue to stick to these ways, your team is going to be as good as your recruits be. And sometimes that's good. Maybe it's a bad thing. But that being said, I want to talk about the Friday games, what happened with UNLV and Boise. The game was actually kind of slow paced. Boise kind of was whooping on them early, and then UNLV scored, and they tried to make a game of it, but it just wasn't too much going on there. They couldn't really get a good game going. And I can't even really say that Boise really tore it up neither. Maddox Madsen was mediocre at best. He had 158 yards and a touchdown, and Alshon Jensen had 32 carries for 209 yards, and he had a touchdown as well. And I feel like most times they play as good as Alshon Jensen let them play, and he usually keep the team and carry that whole team on his back, and that's exactly what he did in that game. So congratulations to Boise State. 21-7 was that final score. Tulane and Army played as well, and that game wasn't close at all. Army blew them out. It was 35-14. And I feel like with that game, Bryson Daly played okay. It wasn't nothing spectacular. He was 2 for 2 for 17 yards passing. For the most part, I feel like the ground game killed Tulane. And Kane Udo really looked sharp on the ground. He had 158 yards and he had a touchdown, but 35-14, that just lets you know how good Army was. Army lost the game and they're ranked 24. Hopefully they can build off of that because I felt like they didn't really play a lot of people or heavy competition. And when they did, they played Notre Dame and Notre Dame blew them out. So that's one of the reasons why I feel like they wasn't in the playoffs. And they didn't really play a lot of teams and sometimes they struggled. So that's the reason why Army's not in. And I feel like if they can follow up with a really good season, they possibly can be in the playoffs. So, and that'll be next season. But all said and done, it was a really awesome college weekend. I definitely enjoy, the game, the Georgia Texas again. Surprised that Texas lost twice at home to Georgia. But the Clemson SMU game definitely lived up to the hype. Penn State, Oregon was actually better than what I thought it was going to be as well. So yeah, it was a really good weekend so far, so good, and that's my opinion. I want to move on, and I want to talk about the Army and Navy game too. That's going to be a good one because I usually don't look forward to it like this, but I'm gonna watch it anyway. So everybody knows that. But the Army and Navy game, I want to see what it's going to be because both teams are above 500. Navy is 8-3, Army's 11-1. I want to see Army finish the season strong. My prediction on that game is going to be low scoring. Army and Navy always have good games, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's going to be 14-28, and I'm going to go with Army on this one. I want to go over into the NFL right now too, and I want to talk about the Thursday game. I had a couple of my buddies over and we watched the game, man, and my heart was beating fast. This was a really good game. We have a lot of injuries too, so I thought maybe it was time, that we could possibly lose with all the injuries on defense. We have 13 players out right now. I believe we have six on both sides, the most of any team in the NFL, and we still are able to make it work. And with the grit and grind of what's going on in Detroit, and I really appreciate the passion of the coaches and the players and most importantly is the fans, man. I'm rocking my Honolulu Blue right now, and I'm very excited to be a Detroit Lions fan. I want to get into the game. Jordan Love looked pretty sharp on the day. I usually expect for him to try to play hero ball and make mistakes, but he actually played pretty clean on the day. He had 206 yards in the touchdown. The guy who was really the person who carried that team on his back was Josh Jacobs. He had 18 carries. He had 66 yards, but he had three scores as well. Okay. Christian Watson had some really good balls thrown to him too. He had four receptions for 114 yards. I'm just glad that a lot of those didn't really go to scores. Sometimes I feel like when they did score, it was because they stopped us on possessions. One of them was a 4th-and-1 play, which I was surprised that we actually went for that close in our territory and gave the ball back to them. But other than that, I still feel like we played a really good game. I was disappointed with the pick with Jared Goff that caused us some points too. But after that, he adjusted well. He had 283 yards passing with three touchdowns, and he had a pick, and that was the pick that got them points. David Montgomery had 14 carries for 51 yards, and he had a touchdown. And my man's Jamison Williams had five receptions for 80 yards as well. It was really a good game, and where I kind of figured we might be able to close the game out was when it was a 4th-and-3 play at the end of the game, and the Green Bay decided to go ahead for the field goal to tie the game. I said, "Uh-oh, it's too much time." I was a little scared that they went for too many of those 4th-and-1s, and the one that really scared me was when Jared Goff was falling and he had to turn around and he had to give the ball to David Montgomery, but then he still made it up to be like 3 or 4 yards. And they wanted to not give the ball back to Jordan Love at any time because they seen how he was throwing the ball, down the field, and he was doing it at ease, even with our cornerbacks being back, Carlton Davis, and we had Terry and Arnold back. Still was getting a lot of deep balls thrown on us. And I feel like without really having a lot of the pass rush and our defensive interior line is being injured and banged up, I wasn't really too upset with Dan Campbell saying that he wanted to put the game in our offense hands. And I was glad he did because that field goal was a difference. It's going to be a different story this week. And I will definitely be discussing that as well. But the final score was 34-31. Congratulations, the Lions are 12-1, and we still getting heat for that, man. Everybody wants us to fail and fall off, but I'm definitely hoping we can keep in stride right now. So, you know, go Lions. Saints and Giants was a really bad game. I don't really want to discuss it as much. The game was just really bad, and the end of the game too would let you know how bad it was. Drew Lock ended up trying to get the ball downfield, in which I felt like he did a good job, but it was a field goal block at the end of the game, and the final score was funky. It was 14-11. That being said, I want to move on from that game. Cleveland Browns and the Steelers game was actually pretty close at one point until it wasn't. And Russell Wilson was kind of looking slow in that game. He had 158 yards and two touchdowns. Najee Harris had 53 yards in the score, and Pat Fryermuth looked pretty good on the day with 48 yards and a touchdown. Jerry Jeudy has kept up this intensity, definitely after the game that he played with Denver with that crazy stat line of like 200 some yards in the score. He had 5 receptions for 64 yards and a touchdown. And Jameis Winston, the good with the bad, he had 212 yards, two touchdowns, and he had two picks. And that was the final score, 27-14. Once the Pittsburgh Steelers got it going, they got it going, and they didn't stop. Okay. I want to talk about the Falcons and Vikings game. That game was actually pretty close. And what messed up that game was a fumble on the kickoff. That fumble on a kickoff cost them because once the Vikings got the ball and they scored and it was 21-28, they didn't look back. And unfortunately, Kirk Cousins did Kirk Cousins things in that game. He threw two picks. He had 344 yards, but the two picks were very costly in that game. And that's when the game really got out of hand. Bijan Robinson had 92 carries for a touchdown, and Darnell Mooney looked pretty sharp on the day too. He had 6 receptions for 142 yards. Didn't get in the end zone, but Aaron Jones looked pretty sharp, 273 yards, and he had a touchdown. Jordan Addison really lit it up, man. He had 8 receptions, 133 yards, and he had 3 touchdowns. If I'm not mistaken, too, Justin Jefferson had 2 touchdowns as well, but I believe the person who was the player of the day was Jordan Addison. He looked really good. If Sam Darnold couldn't find him, he was finding Justin Jefferson open all day. He had 347 yards and 5 touchdowns. Now, this is an instance where I don't believe Sam Darnold is going to actually stay with Minnesota. He'd improved himself after going through the mud, man. He was with the Jets. He went to the Panthers. And then once he went to San Francisco and learned under Kyle Shanahan and got the job with Minnesota, I believe it's his time for him to go and find him a team where he can make a lot of money now, because I think he's a proven quarterback now. And I hope that be something for him and it lasts for a while. I hope that he can get that Geno Smith respect. But I believe now that they will be keeping Daniel Jones in Minnesota and waiting for J.J. McCarthy, because I believe they're going to give a lot of money to Sam Darnold. Whether he do good or bad, he will have money thrown his way, especially with those stat lines of 347 yards and 5 touchdowns. That final score was 42-21, by the way. Buccaneers and Raiders was actually a pretty good game, closer than what people would say at first until it wasn't anymore. Baker Mayfield had 295 yards, 3 touchdowns, and he had two picks on the day. Rashad White came back and he looked pretty good, 90 yards and a touchdown on the day. Aiden O'Connell had 104 yards and an interception. And that's basically all I got to say about that, because it wasn't really a lot of offense when it came to the Raiders. It's unfortunate, too, because I feel like now they're definitely going to get rid of Antonio Pierce. That's just my opinion. I don't think that he did enough to keep that job. There's a possibility now by, Tom Brady being one of the guys that's over there. It's a possibility not only that they get a new coach, but they probably look in a whole different direction now. So, yeah, it hurts me to say that. I would like for them to give Antonio Pierce another a season at least to prove himself, but I don't think that's going to happen. That final score was 28-13. This was a good one. Panthers versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Bryce Young actually didn't look that bad this game neither. I'm starting to look at it and say they might still look for a quarterback in the draft. They don't really necessarily have to. It's other positions that they can fill right now because he's definitely not the whole problem. Since he's came back after being benched, he's been playing quite well. He had 191 yards, a touchdown, and he had a pick on the day. And Chuba Hubbard had 92 yards in the score as well. Adam Thielen really looked consistent. He had 9 receptions for 102 yards as well. Jalen Hurts wasn't that effective as you thought he'd be with his arm. He had 108 yards and 2 touchdowns. Saquon Barkley had 20 carries for 124 yards, didn't get in the end zone. A.J. Brown really looked like pedestrian. He had 4 receptions, 43 yards. And that's funny, too, because the final score in that game could have been different. It was a drop pass from Xavier Leggett. And if he could have kept control of the ball and went in the end zone without being touched, it possibly would have been a different direction. If that would have happened, man, heads would be flying from Nick Sirianni on down. And that's where the conversation came from, even in a losing effort. I know Brandon Ingram said a few things on the podcast saying that Jalen Hurts is trying, and AJ Brown is basically not really having it right now. He's getting upset. They're friends before they was on teams, but him not really trying to pay extra close or too much attention and focus fully on him as his number one target is starting to get a strain between those guys. And when he spoke about it, he apologized later, saying he shouldn't have brought that information out there. But you can see it. I seen it last year. Like, yeah, AJ's starting to become a diva. He's getting upset. He's not getting the ball a lot more. And, I feel like Jalen Hurts is trying to make it work. But if you're not open and if you can't get the ball, or if I can't find you to where I can give you the ball, I'm going to give it to who's open. That's just the bottom line. I'm not going to try to force feed you how Josh Allen was doing with Stephon Diggs, and then you seen how that worked out later on. I felt like that wasn't going to last. And if this continues and start to leak out, especially teammates talking about it in podcasts, I don't see them two lasting that long neither. So that being said, um, they still got some issues in Philly that they need to sort out. Jaguars and Titans was a really bad game. That final score was the Jaguars won 10-6, and it was on a rush touchdown by Tanks Bigsby. And I'm gonna just leave it at that. I'm gonna move on and I'm gonna talk about the Jets Dolphins game because at first I thought the Dolphins was going to lose because the Jets was up pretty big. And Rodgers had 339 yards in the score. Tua had 331 yards and 2 touchdowns. Devon Achane had 24 yards in the score. And Tyreek Hill got in the end zone finally. He had 10 receptions for 115 yards. And Garrison Wilson had 7 receptions for 114 yards with the Jets. End of the day, it went to overtime, and the Jets lost in overtime. They're 3-10. They're not going anywhere. It's time to reboot or do whatever they're going to do over there. And that 32-26 score basically let me know that even if they have a lead, they can lose a lead and they just fall off, man. I just don't feel like they have enough over there. A lot of the problems they made it seem like it was with, Joe Douglas. And then they looked at it and said, it was Robert Saleh. No, man, there's a lot more going on than that. And I think it all starts with Aaron Rodgers. That's just my opinion. Seahawks and the Cardinals. That was a weird game because I thought the Cardinals was going to be a lot better, but you never know which Cardinal team you're going to get. Neither they're so Jekyll and Hyde. Geno did just enough with the 233 yards and the touchdown, but Zach Charbonnet was the one who really surprised me. He really had an outcoming, a big good game right there. That was his showcase game. That's what I should have said. Let me clear that up. He had 134 yards and 2 scores. When Kenneth Walker wasn't playing, I said, okay, this is his time to shine. They're going to have to figure out what they're going to do soon. I know they're going to go with the two-headed monster right now, but if Kenneth Walker continues to get hurt and if Zach Charbonnet can play at this level still, they might want to trade or seek a trade for one of the guys and figure out what they'll do in the future. But until then, I still feel like Seattle's been playing great. They won, got on a 2-3 game win streak. They're 8-5. They're on top of that division, and they look like they're ready to close out that division. Jackson Smith and Jigma had 5 receptions, 82 yards, and a touchdown, and he seemed like he'd be in the end zone more than not. Kyler Murray had 259 yards, two touchdowns, and he had two picks on the day as well. And I just don't really see what's going on. They're missing something. It's a lot that they're missing. I still feel like they need another receiver right there on the side of Marvin Harrison Jr. And I feel like they need something else. If something is missing, they got James Conner. They got a good tight end. I believe they need better pass rush help, and they need a stronger O line to help out with Kyler Murray. But it's a few pieces that's missing that I feel like they need to fix and address. But they're going to always be like a 500 or just slightly below 500 team until they fix some of these issues that they have in house, and hopefully they can get it together. I don't think Kyler Murray's the problem, but I still feel like it's issues over there that need to be addressed. That final score was 38-18, like I was saying, and I just want to move on now because I feel like as much as I like the Cardinals and I felt like they can do better this year, but you just never know what team will show up. And right now, when it comes to offense and defense, Seattle's been clicking. So congratulations to them and leading that division right now. This was a really crazy game right here, the Bills and the Rams, because I feel like that was a game the Bills was going to take and they was just going to run away with it, but I was wrong. It was a shootout. Both defenses kind of got to the point where they was giving up a lot of plays. Josh Allen had 342 yards and three touchdowns. At one point, they were losing by like 10 points, and they caught back up and made it a game. They made that game very interesting at the end. But Josh Allen on the ground, man, he's dangerous, man. Like I said, he had 342 yards and three touchdowns, but on the ground, he had 82 yards and another three touchdowns to go with that. And his wide receiver right now is Khalil Shakir. That's a guy you're going to have to pay attention to, especially this week. And I will get into it. He had five receptions for 106 yards and a touchdown. And one of those plays was a screen play that he took to the house. But Matthew Stafford, oh, reliable, man, you still got to give him credit where credit is due. He had 320 yards and two touchdowns. Kyron Williams had 87 yards and two touchdowns, and Puka Nakua had 12 receptions for 162 yards, and he had a score as well. That final score was 44-42. It was just they couldn't get the touchdown in on time and keep their timeout. I would have went in, and if I couldn't get the touchdown, went for it again and kept my timeout, because when they used that timeout, it was basically a sure thing that they were going to have to do an onside kick. It's 1 in 100 chance that you can make that, and that's just the way the game went. Once the Rams got the possession, that was the end of the game. It's going to get interesting too because we take them this week, and I'll be making my predictions. The Bears and the 49ers game never was even close. Brock Purdy had 325 yards. He had two touchdowns. Isaiah Garendo had 78 yards and two touchdowns. And George Kittle had a really good game with six receptions, and he had 161 yards as well. Caleb Williams, I feel bad because he had 134 yards and two touchdowns, but it wasn't never really close to nothing that he can do right now. It's just a lot going on over there. We had high expectations for the Bears, but they're still a young and up and coming team. I mean, they still have Keenan Allen and they have, DJ Moore, and they got weapons around Caleb, but they're going to have to do better with that O line, and it's a lot of things that still needs to be fixed over there. And I hope they fix it sooner than later because they're going to still continue to have those struggles until they get all these issues addressed. But that final score was 38-13, and it's looking like more problems for them. Kansas City versus the Los Angeles Chargers was a really good game. At first, it was like Kansas City was up. Coach Harbaugh found out what he had to do and made some good adjustments. At the very end, when you think that it's over, when you give the ball back to Patrick Mahomes, man, he's starting to look like a la Tom Brady, Joe Montana. Don't let him get the ball last with too much time on the clock. A minute, hell, 30 seconds is probably too much for him now. They just drove it down the field, kicked the field goal, final score. When you thought that it was going to be over 16-17, it ended up being 19-17 in favor of the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm starting to think about it now. Like, man, they're definitely going back to the Super Bowl and possibly could make a three-peat. I might be wrong, but I doubt it right about now. They could definitely make another run. I know they got a lot of injuries, but the one person still that they got to get past, they're still going to have to get past Lamar Jackson, which seems kind of, feasible. And then, you never know what type of Josh Allen you're going to get in the playoffs. The Monday night game wasn't really nothing spectacular to me. I liked the graphics and the Simpsons stuff that they put in it, but other than that, the game spoke for itself. Joe Burrow had 369 yards, three touchdowns. Jamar Chase had 177 yards and two scores. Cooper Rush didn't really look like he's that guy, even after having a 4-0 record before Dak came back a few seasons ago. He had 183 yards, two touchdowns, and he had a pick on the day. And CD Lamb had 93 yards in the score. The running back really looked good. Rico Dowdell, he had 131 yards on the ground, but I just still feel like they don't have a lot over there after losing so much and not bringing back, Jerry Jones saying he was all in, and now with Dak hurt, man, I don't really feel like they would have made the playoffs even with Dak or everybody healthy. So I feel like them pieces need to come back. They need to bring the pieces over there for them to play and execute. They need better guys over there. You just can't have the guys that you have on your team. You got to get some veteran players, some good people in free agency, but they didn't go all in, especially running back position. Yeah, Rico Dowdle is actually playing good right now, but I still don't feel like they have enough. You could have got Derrick Henry. You could have went after Saquon Barkley. There's a lot of things they could have did to better the team. And now they'll be on the outside looking in. So hopefully they'll figure something out by then. I want to go into my predictions right now, too, in the NFL. And I want to talk about a few things that's going to happen in week 15. I want to start with the Thursday game with the Los Angeles Rams and 49ers. I'm going to take the Rams in this one. They have San Francisco, but I'll take the points too at 2.5 with the Rams winning on the road. Buffalo Bills at Detroit. They got us as a 1.5 point favorite. I'll take those points. The Ravens versus Giants, I'm going to go with the Ravens at 14 and a half. And that's all I got to say about that one. The Jets and Jaguars, I go with the Jets with the 3.5 point spread. Cowboys and the Panthers, I'm actually going with the Panthers, and I'm going to take the 2.5 points. Commanders and Saints, I'm going with the Washington Commanders, and I'm going to take the 7 points. Bengals and Titans, I'm going to go over that 5 points, and I'm going to take Cincinnati. Chiefs and the Browns, I'm going to go with the Chiefs, and I'm going to go a little bit over that 4.5. I'm going to say 7. Dolphins and the Texans, I'm going to go with the Texans, and I'll take the 2.5 points. Colts and Broncos, I'm going to go with Denver, and I'll take the 4. Patriots and Arizona, I'm going to go with Arizona. I'm going to take the 5.5. Bucks and Chargers, I'll take the Chargers at home with the 3 points. This is a good one right here, you guys. The Battle with Philadelphia. The Steelers and the Eagles, I'm actually going to go with the Steelers, and I'm going to take them at the 4.5 point spread. Packers and the Seahawks, I'm going to go with the Packers with 3. And then the Bears and Vikings, of course, I'm going with Minnesota with 7. Man, this is going to be a funky Monday night game. The Falcons and Raiders, I'm going to take the Atlanta Falcons, and I'm going to take the 4.5 points. And that's basically all I have this week. I have more stats and things that I will get into next time I get back on the show. I just wanted to talk to you about some of the things that happened in college, and I wanted to break down some of the things that went on in the NFL as well. Definitely enjoyed this week in college. Some of the things didn't go my way, but hey, it is what it is. It's a new day, and I appreciate the new playoff format and how they're shaping up. Hopefully, they'll add more teams to where it's 16 eventually in the future. But until then, I like the direction. I like where they're going right now, where they're headed in college. And on top of that, I appreciate all the NFL people. And if you have any questions or things that you want me to talk about, you can get with me on my social media. And like I say, Hoovy is my Instagram page. Now I'm just put my podcast and, press more of my work and the things that I'm doing. I'm not going to put any advertisement or any reels on there anymore. I'm going to focus on my originality on Instagram from now on. Sports Guru to you. I will still put the sports and the breaking news on there. And when it comes to like the reels, I will continue my reels on TikTok. And of course, you can get me on sportsguru to you at gmail.com if you have any questions or anything that you want me to add on and put on to the podcast. I do the Guru Perspective every week, Tuesday at 1 p.m. And on Wednesday at 9 p.m., you can catch me on the Guru Sports Session. Thank you once again. Have a blessed day. I appreciate you all for chiming in. And I hope everything's going well with you guys and wish you a happy and blessed, safe holiday. Stay tuned until the next episode.